Shana Tova. Days after the world's very first Rosh Hashanah, the birthday celebration of our universe, after illuminations of color and light and life, the first human being experiences darkness. Our Talmudic sages teach, after God creates the world, the first human, Adam, witnesses the sun sinking in the sky. And Adam cries out, "Woe is me, for it must be that the sun is sinking because I have done wrong. How the earth is darkening and returning to desolation and nothingness. It's my fault." So Adam sits down and mourns, fasting and weeping through the night. How I wish I could have begun this sermon about how this past year was so F-U-N. How wrong was I? But I can't. For Leo Beckers, for American Jews, and for the Jewish people writ large, I hope I can speak on our behalf when I say that last year, 5784, was not fun. Instead, last year precipitated turbulence and fear. It is as if what life normally delivers, illness, health struggles, financial stress, grief, were not enough. The horrors of October 7th and its aftermath for so many peoples are poignant reminders that we inhabit a horribly destabilizing world, especially now. It makes me, and perhaps you as well, wonder whether there has been a noticeable, palpable shift in what it means to be Jewish in this moment in history. The sense of belonging that once anchored us may have been replaced by a mixture of Jewish self-consciousness, insecurity, and for some, disconnection. When the fabric of our Jewish identity feels frayed, the idea of F-U-N might feel like a faraway memory. But today I do not wish to further discuss the darkness nationwide or across the sea. I need to explore the darkness happening in our own neighborhoods, our own backyards, our own families, and sometimes even in our own hearts too. Our nation is incredibly polarized, and we cannot avoid its implications for our relationships at home. We do not just feel the division in our bones or sense it during debates on the TV. It's true, it's live, and it's real. Contemporary scholarship agrees that currently America is experiencing unprecedented levels of polarization. Now, it's not always bad for our country. Difference of opinion en masse can at times be helpful for democracy, helping to breed activism and civic engagement, vibrant innovation, and political reform. However, too much fractioning can cause humanity to overlook an entirely separate subset of humanity beyond their opposing views, making it difficult to reach solutions for society-wide challenges. At this rate, where we are today, both the theory and the data suggest two potential future outcomes. One, polarization might decrease and stabilize, waning naturally like a pendulum. Or two, we will encounter more entrenched, self-reinforcing division in our country, driven by factors such as media bias, extreme partisanship, and increased stereotyping. But the scholarship's scariest finding in my eyes is that if we should encounter the latter outcome, further polarization engenders humankind to feel license to disrespect those with whom we disagree and feel license to hate them. Not only is it becoming more difficult to hold a true, honest, open conversation with someone who does not share the same opinion as you or as me, but it is markedly and scientifically studied that polarization is making us more prone to being hateful. Not just them, but you and me too. When our worldviews force us into rigid categories, us versus them, right versus wrong, and when we accept these binaries as truth, we trap ourselves into narrowness. Binaries in this way become a form of imprisonment. In his commencement address at Brandeis University this spring, contemporary American filmmaker Ken Burns emphasizes what we forget when we fall into such a binary discourse. We forget the inconvenient complexities of history and of human nature, he writes. That, for example, 3 great religions, their believers, all children of Abraham and Sarah, each professing at the heart of their teaching a respect for all human life, each with a central connection and legitimate claim to the same holy ground, violate their own dictates of conduct and make this perpetually contested land into a shameful graveyard. God does not distinguish between the dead. I fear as a society, we are forgetting our histories and human nature. I fear that we cannot hold 2 wrongs and 2 rights as easily anymore. That we rigidly, even vengefully, wear either blue or red on our sleeves. That there are the young, and there are the old, and there are the parents, and there are the children. There are those who shout, "Bring the hostages home by any means necessary," and those who cry out, "All eyes on Rafah." And each yearns for its own holy space and its own holy time, separate from different aged and different-minded people. And so we all exist in cavernous echo chambers. As we trudge closer toward this critical election in our country, I fear that polarization also affects us at our own dining room tables. 6 months ago, I was on the phone with a dear family friend, Lisa, my parents' generation, whose adult son, Jason, was poised to fly home for Passover Seder. She told me they have been hosting an intergenerational family Seder for decades since Jason was born. Lisa was nervous about her son's participation in the Seder this year, and I asked why. She said she felt their relationship had been strained as of late. They would often revert to discussing the Israel-Hamas war, whether or not either of them wished to discuss it. The conversation just came up. Lisa would say that, of course Israel has valid reasons for defending herself. And like clockwork, Jason would say that the Palestinians have borne too much suffering. Lisa told me that she felt angry. She felt the need to swallow her words and stop talking about the war, and maybe for the moment, stop talking with her son altogether. Lisa's and Jason's opinions align with a recent Pew Research Center study written by Dr. Laura Silver and her colleagues, stating that young U.S. adults are more likely to sympathize entirely with Palestinian people, and older U.S. adults are more likely to sympathize entirely with the Israeli people. I know today, still, Lisa and Jason experience anger, resentment, and struggle because they still stand on opposite ground. And that really hurts me. It hurts me mainly because I know that it's not just Lisa. And I know that it's not just Jason. Perhaps some of us, like Lisa, feel the sting of family discord. Or perhaps some of us, like Jason, feel unheard or misunderstood. This is exactly the phenomenon that Rabbi Chasen described last night. Both Lisa's and Jason's are among us. The current context in which we live has made it hard, perhaps painful, to hold a conversation with someone who disagrees. I have seen our Leobeck Temple community members stop speaking with loved ones, afraid of the confrontation that might arise from engaging with those who view the world differently. I have politically divergent friends who are cut off from one another because it is too agonizing for them. I have experienced in my own family that when politics are mentioned, the only sound heard at the dinner table is the clink of a spoon swirling soup against the inside of a ceramic bowl. Yes, it might be easier to be in relationship with those only with whom we share beliefs. But I believe that distancing ourselves from our loved ones, this is not the way to build an ethical and decent civilization. I believe I cannot change a loved one's point of view. But what I can do is listen to a loved one and appreciate the humanity that shapes those views. My proposition, it might sound simple, too simple even. It is anything but. The proposition, listen. Listen. We can begin to repair the fractures in our society by listening to family in our own dining rooms and in our own living rooms. Now, listening is not agreeing with or sanctioning anything we hear, nor is it finding comfort in the familiarity in our own beliefs. Listening is more than hearing. It is about engaging with the humanity of the other. Listening requires setting aside our own judgments and our own fears and opening ourselves up to the possibility that someone can legitimately hold another perspective. And if we believe that we will never understand that perspective, we all have the capacity, and in fact, we all have the obligation to recognize that person's humanity. Because in doing so, we reaffirm our own. In Jewish tradition, listening is a sacred act. The Shema begins with the command, Shema Yisrael, listen up, O people of Israel. The Talmud fills itself with phrases that emphasize the importance of Shema. Phrases like, Tashma, come and listen to me. This invites the reader of the Talmud to consider a new teaching, something they haven't learned before from Torah. And Kama Shma Lan, let us listen to this. This clarifies an assumption when explanation might be necessary. All of these phrases show that listening remains at the core of our tradition. Judaism itself is a tradition of wrestling, of holding multiple perspectives across millennia. Rabbinic literature contains tomes of arguments steeped in Jewish law that include not simply the final majority opinion, but also the preserved minority opinions and the conversations that ensue along the way. Here, our ancient sages argue not to convince each other that the other is wrong. Rather, they wrestle with competing ideas in search of truth. And here, on Rosh Hashanah, we hear the sound of the shofar. Interestingly enough, the blessing that we recite before blowing the shofar does not actually bless blowing the shofar. You'd think that. Instead, we bless listening to the sound of the shofar. Lishmoa kol shofar. The focus is on the act of listening itself, on being attuned, on how truly letting in sound and soul opens us in ways we might need opening, on reflecting on how we want to show up and be different in this year to come. And beyond its importance in Judaism, listening nurtures our spiritual core too. Dr. Lisa Miller, founder of the Spirituality Mind-Body Institute and professor of psychology and education at Columbia University's Teachers College, observes that human beings are inherently spiritual, and this spirituality can be cultivated and nurtured throughout our entire lives. But what does a strong spiritual core look like, and what does it have anything to do with listening? She writes that natural spirituality is the direct sense of listening to the heartbeat of the universe, of being one with the seen and the unseen, open and at ease in connection. Common phenotypes based on her study: interconnectedness, love in many places and in many relationships, and practices of connection. These are all aspects of listening that bring us closer to those closest to us, even if that proves difficult. I want to share one important caveat. Issues of safety complicate our capacity to listen across barriers of belief, which is complicated enough when we do have power and safety. We may only feel safe in certain power dynamics, or if our physical or mental or emotional well-beings are cared for, or only so long as the other person remains tolerant. An unsafe or an intolerant conversation makes it remarkably challenging, if not infeasible, to listen to a variant perspective. And that's okay. As a white, cisgender, straight male rabbi, I recognize that my identities provide me with more tolerance to engage with difference. Folks of other identities, especially marginalized identities, may experience more risk in listening to those in their families. There is safety, and there is also discomfort, and there is a difference. Have you ever been in a difficult conversation with someone who disagrees and felt uncomfortable? it's understandable not to want to engage with that person. There's a famous midrash. When the Israelites are escaping from Egypt and they reach the Red Sea, they find themselves trapped between the sea and the approaching Egyptian army. The Israelite people, they're terrified and they're not sure what to do. The sea has not yet been parted, and the Israelites await a miracle. Nachshon ben Aminadav, the leader of the tribe of Judah, takes the first bold step. While everyone else stands frozen in fear, Nachshon walks forward into the sea. The water reaches his ankles, and then his knees, rising to his waist, to his chest, and up to his neck. It is only when the water covers his mouth that the sea finally parts, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry land. How far we enter the waters of a challenging conversation is personal and identity dependent and safety dependent. Our personhood is context for our level of discomfort and safety. It is not helpful to be outside of our safety zone. I believe it can be helpful to be outside of our comfort zones sometimes. It can broaden our level of empathy. It can build resilience. It can clarify and increase confidence in our own values and what we believe, and it can foster adaptability. This year, I wonder what it would look like for us to walk into the waters of discourse across borders safely, but a little bit farther than we feel comfortable today. I wonder what it would take for us to listen when our urge is to walk away, to ask maybe one more question in a tense discussion, to pause and seek to understand before sharing an opinion, to respond instead of react. In his new work this past year, David Brooks writes, "How to Know a Person, the Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen." And in it, he speaks of the difference between illuminators and diminishers. Diminishers listen to others with contempt, focusing on how to refute the other person rather than understanding them and where they come from. But illuminators, on the other hand, these are those who listen with curiosity, who care about what the other person is saying because it's them saying it, not because they necessarily agree with their words. In this book, Micha Goodman, senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, teaches Brooks, the author himself, that a great conversation is between two people who think the other is wrong. But a bad conversation is between those who think that someone is wrong with you. A bad conversation is between those who think that something is wrong with you. There is a difference between telling someone that they're wrong about something and believing that someone, who they are, in their core, in their humanity, is wrong. To become illuminators leads to tolerant inclusivity. When we enter conversations with curiosity rather than contempt, we model how to live amongst diversity of belief. to address not caricatures whom we may have created in our minds, but to address humans, real human beings with emotions and families and complexities, maybe sitting right next to us. Elements of life that we all share leads us to becoming more human. What might it look like this year to truly listen? And to whom? Who in your lives do you make into a caricature? Is it a family member? Is it a friend? Is it a coworker? What is that doing to your relationship? How can this season of teshuvah strengthen your chances of choosing a more humanizing path? How can you lend an open, trusting ear? Can you ask one more question? Can you offer one more bid of understanding? When our sages teach that Adam, the first human, sees that sun setting, and Adam fears that the world would return to darkness and desolation, Adam notices that the dawn rises. This is simply the way of the world. Adam then offers a sacrifice, an act of trust, that the earth be filled with hope, with illuminating light once more. Our sacrifice today is that very same trust of the very first human being. It's trust that when we listen to those in our lives who may see the world differently, we affirm their humanity and our own too. This year in 5785, may we commit to the sacred act of listening. Let us listen to the voices of those closest to us, even if it's difficult. Let the sounds of the shofar inspire us to listen in kind, with openness and with rawness. And let us listen to the still, small voice within us, that pure soul whispering, "Be an illuminator, be an illuminator, be an illuminator." Shana Tova.